I'm here because my grandmother believed in education. And she didn't know she was going to be here. I was looking at it, and particularly the pearls, and I thought there was a whole new line, how to dress for TED when you're dead. It didn't come as a result of type A planning or anything. It came mainly because my grandmother's family came from Kilkenny, and in Kilkenny it was compulsory to believe in miracles. Education was plan B. And I've been left with this curious legacy of trying to put the two together. And in some ways, I think creativity really involves having a very irritating idea and playing with it for a very long time until you can make something work. So really, my grandmother's been behind all this, and it's nice for her to be watching over us. By the way, if you're worried about airports and security, this is the sort of person to look out for. An Irish woman who believes in education and is probably looking out for me for teasing her about her clothes. When I went to school, I studied fiercely, because I thought this was going to lead to a miracle. The other part of the deal is I was terribly nervous about talking to girls, and study seemed an easier option. And I ended up doing pretty well, and I won prizes and stuff like that. And there was no miracle. Actually, for the people who did get the girls, often nothing happened for them either. So we were sort of on a par, I guess. During school, I was really interested in science, and the initial thing for kids at school, well, for me anyway, I wanted to learn how to blow things up. And at school, this was not allowed. And in fact, the science they taught was boring. And so I ended up turning to art. It wasn't even very kosher to be excited about both science and art. It was meant to be one or the other, not both. Anyway, I shifted to art. And I went to art school. And spectacularly, the art school managed to make art boring as well. And my main achievement at art school was to get a really bad dose of pneumonia. And they don't give you a PhD for pneumonia. So I ended up kind of stranded. And those were strange times because the government actually paid for us to go to university. And I owed the government quite a bit of money, and all I had to show for it was pneumonia. And the thing that happened next was the deal was you had to go to teachers' college if you hadn't, finished your qualification properly. So I went to teachers' college, and teachers' college was actually really exciting. It was extraordinary. It was the first hint of something that approached what I thought my grandmother was on about. It was education that at least was getting closer to a miracle. But we then got sent into regular schools. And regular schools were the pits. The thing I recall most fondly about regular schools were the cloakrooms, which were smelly. These are not cloakrooms here. These are way south, sort of agricultural cloakrooms. I don't want to disparage the local cloakrooms. The thing about the cloakrooms was there was something honest about them. And so you had this funny scene with kids who were wonderful, and you had teachers who were wonderful, but an institution which I thought was totally weird. I mean, we were teaching in the country, teaching kids to learn words that had been concocted by bureaucrats in Wellington, and it didn't fit. There was something wrong with it. Now, I was lucky, really, because I worked out how much I owed the government. I owed the government about the price of 2 really rather nice new cars. And a doctor wrote me a little ticket saying I was allergic to schools, and which I really appreciated, so I got away with it. This was about the time Woody Guthrie was inviting people in America to get convictions for littering so they could dodge the draft, you know. Not everyone can remember back that far. I felt sort of on a par with that. I'd, you know, dodged paying back all this money. Now, a long time went by, but there's something about grandmothers, they keep looking over your shoulder, you know? And so this sort of itch was still there. And eventually, something happened. I was invited to do an art course. And for some reason, I decided I would do the art course, Making Art with Dried Food. This wasn't cooking, this was making art with dried food. And what came out of it was what I now call the spaghetti miracle. And we had people playing, I mean, 7 people paid for this course. I mean, it still astounds me. And really it was the beginning of our school. I didn't know that at the time. I mean, you don't really see ahead. You don't quite know what's going to happen next. So people made these things. They not only had spaghetti, they had exciting things like lentils and, you know. And we had a huge amount of fun. And I think what was liberating is suddenly we were free of the whole history of how you were supposed to do it. So we were just kind of playing. But the materials themselves are really interesting because there's a discipline that comes out of the material. So you're not just playing, you're paying attention to whatever you're working with. Now, out of this came, miraculously, what is now the biggest art school in New Zealand. You just start off with dried food and add water. I mean, it just seemed to happen. I don't know. So I got my staff to start testing out this idea, and we did it just recently. And this is one of the spaghetti structures, which I thought, you know, had architectural engineering qualities about it. And these don't come easily. They're quite complex. This one's about balance. Here the spaghetti is used as a design unit. And this one I thought was extraordinary. I think it's with flax seeds or linseed or whatever. And they're put on a piece of, well, multiple pieces of clear sellotape, and then hung in a window. So you've got this square with the sky behind it. And I thought it was just captivating. I thought that was the piece that came through to being real art. It was very special. And we have lots of students doing this kind of stuff. And we've, from time to time, polled the students to say, how do you rate your well-being now compared to how it was when you started? And the last one, which we did last month, the improvement in well-being was 43%, which is extraordinary. I mean, that's an improvement in well-being through this kind of play. But it's, when I say play, people get confused about play. Play, you can have serious play, and it's play that ends up going somewhere. I think all work in the end is best when it is playful work. Now I want to diverge just for a moment. How many tasks can a man do at once? You don't have to answer. I feel quite stretched doing this and this, but I've looked this up and found that men are growing between 5 million and 7 million hairs at once without thinking about it. Blondes are actually growing more hairs because they're finer and they've got more. So when you get into those jokes, just remember that. Now, there's another curious thing. Our brains have about 100 billion cells, which is a lot. And the connections between them, this is just a little demonstration. If you're not into maths, it doesn't matter. But 6 factorial, that's just the connections between 6 units, comes to 720. The connections between the cells in our brains comes to more than the entire number of atoms in the universe. Now we have kids who come in through smelly cloakrooms into classrooms with these cosmic brains, and we teach them 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. That's nuts. I mean, it is just truly mad. I don't mind things being boring. In fact, I think there's a place for boring. I want boring electricians. I want boring pilots. And I want, I'm with Alan Bollard. Alan Bollard says boring bankers. I think that's really important. I think in America the bankers got too interesting. So boring is okay, but there are other ways to deal with things. And it's curious because when you think about our intelligence and all the connections, there's something about patterns. Instead of the 1, 2, 3, it's like everything at once. When we see, we don't see one thing and another thing and another thing. We sort of get pow all at once. So something that's been interesting to us is to get people, oh, there's the universe, pardon me, just sneaked up on us. I'm missing the plot here. We get people drawing, and one of the things we do with people drawing is take them through quite a short process. I've never found anyone who can't learn to draw within a week. But most people can learn to draw in something between 10 minutes and 3 hours. And when you draw, you're looking out there, seeing the whole deal. Curiously, this starts with a circle, and it's a bit corny. That's a couple of hours later. This one, simple starting point, same evening. This guy was so shocked by what he had done that he wanted to burn it. He never wanted to live up to that standard. So it was... I would have liked doing that at 16, actually. Now, there's another thing which I think relates to body language. Body language, we actually see things which are really subtle, and we're seeing patterns. So what's happening here, this is just a scribble, and I give people this thing, you know, scribble a feeling. It was an idea created by Betty Edwards in the States, and it's just brilliant. So that's the feeling of anger. Then that one's laughter. And you can ping into more complex things, like this is the feeling of work. That's actually my work with too many lawyers. And this is my ideal work, that's fewer lawyers. Now, sometimes I think when we work in this way, we can pick up on what Ken Robinson said was true north. You can find out through this sort of process what actually matters to people. And instead of giving them a questionnaire, you just give them a few doodles. And you find out it is quite spectacular. It's not mysterious. And we're doing it all from the basis of these patterns. Something works. And I think actually it's the way we relate to art. You look at a picture. I mean, imagine you look at the Mona Lisa and you count how many eyes she's got. Doesn't take you very far. We operate on a different way when we look at art. The way we engage with art is holistic. We're seeing the whole thing at once, and it says something to us. That's why art has persisted. I mean, art seems sublimely useless, but in fact it's this whole giant language which matters. Now, there's some extraordinary research that came out of America from people who've become our friends, Robert and Michelle Root Bernstein. They studied scientists who'd won the Nobel Prize, which is sort of up there for creativity. These scientists, and I'm speaking very roughly here, were 20 times more likely to be involved in the arts than average scientists. And to me, that screams for an education revolution. It is incredible. Now, I went to the Tertiary Education Commission, or sent them an email and said, how about we talk about this? And you would have thought I had taken them into a particularly smelly agricultural cloakroom because they just didn't want to know. And so far, we haven't gotten anywhere with them. I think it's kind of sad. And in fact, I was walking home a few days ago, and I saw, looks like a Keith Haring picture, but actually it's a pair of grippers that are broken. I don't like using the plier word in an auditorium because the hard of hearing will rush for the door. It's, they're grippers. And they're grippers with a screw loose. And I think one half of them is the patterned thinking of education, the experiential thinking, the engaging with life, the universe, and everything. And the other side is learning the codes, the ABC, 1, 2, 3. And until you put them together, you can't get a grip. Thank you.